So let's do our clap test.
Clap test?
Yeah.
Clap test.
Okay, we can cut that out.
Yeah, what editing software do you use?
I just have iMovie.
For sure will be good.
So, are we going to use pseudonyms? How anonymous do we have to be?
I mean, I think first name. I'm comfortable with first name.
George.
George. No problem.
I mean, is the name going to come up?
Well, then I want a name.
Yeah, actually, we don't have to say anything about names.
Yeah.
I'm just some guy.
Yeah.
George.
Some
Well,
dude.
just in case. We'll have George. We'll have
Right.
Barry.
And no, not Terrence. Jean.
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 Jean-Paul.
So when I'm like,
Jean.
Jean, people are gonna be like, yeah, that's his name.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
No, that's stupid. Barry, George, and
Leonard.
great. All right. So, we're here tonight in an attempt to have some conversations that resemble stuff we've been talking about over the past few days, particularly understandings of the nature of existence and consciousness, but also your recent experiences, Barry, with meditation, as you have just returned from a 10-day Vipassana retreat.
Right.
So let us invite the spirits of the ancients and honor them. The intelligences that perhaps we were born to interact with and have yet to properly experience in our human lives. The virtues, the muses, Mnemosyne, Hypatia, Medea, Hecate, Joan of Arc. I like the women. Any other dedications? Wide open. Let's hear it.
Prince.
Oh, the artist formerly named?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, if we're going there, Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix. That's good.
Gosh, who else? Brian Eno, David Byrne,
Mm.
David Lynch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one else is coming to mind.
And how about for you, George?
William Burroughs.
Burroughs, Geisen,
Mm-hmm.
Goethe.
Goethe.
Great. So maybe we can start with a question. Does anyone have one sitting on the table of their mind already?
No. I mean, I just keep going back to meditation because I was just doing 10 days of it, 11 hours a day, and trying to figure out the best means of understanding what I see around me. And what I found as a baseline is that direct experience happens to be the best way to understand things. And that, for me, was something that I intellectualized but had not experienced. And that this is the first time where I'm going back to the basics and really figuring out what I know based on what I can observe and how I interact with it. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, I'd like to make a few comments in relation to that because so I just want to make sure this is still going and probably make a little setting here. Forgive me. Okay, this is hopelessly incomprehensible. so ridiculous. No idea how to keep the screen from going blank. Maybe it doesn't matter.
You would give me the mouse, I could just...
Oh yeah,
Roll
that's
anyway.
right. That's awesome. Yeah, we could just overstimulate the mouse. I'm going to try this one more time. I'm supposed to be a Mac tech, and I can't deal with the screensaver. This is really bad.
There's no search bar? You can't just type in screen?
Yeah, I can, but maybe it's here. So just brightness. No, it's not there. I mean, it really should be under screensaver, but it doesn't seem to be. There's no setting here for the timer.
Try
lock
typing
screen.
in screensaver.
Sure. And this is totally ridiculous. Yeah, it just goes here, which is completely useless, utterly, hopelessly stupid. All right. Oh, there we go. Never. Excellent. Okay, so, I love the sound of my own voice. I think language is amazing. It's also really dangerous. Intellect, huge fan of intelligence and articulate perspective and philosophical, metaphysical, religious speculation and insight. But here's the problem. The longer that I talk, the more I'm lying. And I will totally defect from not knowing what the hell to do in the moment with myself by becoming intellectual. Lots of people find this very impressive, so my intellect and my capacity for articulate speech resemble a sports car that everybody tends to marvel at. So I easily get rewarded for defecting from presence.
Right.
And it's troubling to me because I don't want to die having mostly simply defected from the possibilities of the very things that I hold most dear, which are consciousness, relationships, intimacy, awareness, intelligence, all these things that I talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So for myself, I just want to start out with, the confession, mea culpa, and maxima culpa. I have failed almost completely to enact and embody many of the crucial virtues that I give. What's that phrase in English when you talk about something but you don't do it? You give.
Hypocrisy?
Say again?
Hypocrisy?
Well, thanks. That's more direct, but it's like you give voice to it, but you don't do it.
You say it, but you don't spray it?
Yeah, maybe. So those are some of the things that come to mind for me. Now look, you just went to a retreat where you were meditating for how long each day?
11 hours a day for 10 days.
And in what kind of a sequence in terms of like spans of meditation versus rest and or food and or sleep?
It's in the other room. I can grab it and read it to you. But it's
Give us an idea.
Wake up at 4 a.m. Start meditating at 4:30. Stop meditating at 6:30. Breakfast, hour break. 3 hours of meditation, and then lunch, and then I think like 4 hours of meditation, and then tea break, and then however much time left fills up for the 11 hours, and it intermixed with like teacher discourse, which is them talking about the technique and the benefits and just some advice, and then going to bed. And I slept about 4 to 5 hours a night.
When you're meditating, what if you feel physically uncomfortable? What do you do?
Okay, so
what are the rules?
That's an exceptionally good point. So in the beginning, you're allowed to adjust as much as you want, but towards the end, like about halfway through and beyond, there's 3 sessions, hour-long sits where you're not supposed to uncross your legs or move really at all. The only thing you can do is straighten your back, because you will
sink and
sink
rise.
in,
Yeah.
unless you've been doing this a long time and you've built the back strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens when you're uncomfortable and you're not allowed to move? The technique of Vipassana starts with the understanding that everything is impermanent. The natural law that everything is impermanent. And you can observe that over very large time scales. This stool is probably, if we left it here for, 3 days, it's not going to move on its own. But it's going to be dust at some point.
Right.
And so...
and it was something else before it was that.
Right. And so everything is always moving. And so you're going into the body and you're observing those sensations happening. And you were talking about not being able to be present. Why does that happen? Well, they talk about the root of all suffering is desire and aversion. Why do these cause suffering? Well, if you recognize that everything is changing all the time, and you're attaching yourself to an outcome, or you're attaching yourself to something staying, or you're adverse to something being here, you're suffering because you're forgetting that this process is here.
Well, you're becoming obsessed with a evaluative
Right.
position.
Yes,
right?
yeah, that's a great
And so
way to
you're
put it.
clinging to that evaluation. For example, I'm extremely aware of how fat I am and how I can see, just a puddle of lard. And also concerned about whether the screen is, going dark or not. Whatever, we're having some kind of a problem with it staying in the sense that we want it to stay, because it's producing some light that will change the recording. In any case, physical. You have things like physical pain, exhaustion,
Yes.
desire.
Yep.
Affinity and disaffinity.
Right.
Affinity, and it's not disaffinity, it's antipathy,
Right.
right? What I want and what I don't want to happen,
Yes.
what I'm afraid of and what I hope for. And if we didn't have something like this, it's hard to imagine how we could begin meditating. Because if you had no orienting concern, there'd be nothing to draw you toward the relatively arduous experience of meditation. I began studying meditation when I was right around your age. I encountered this book, the novel about the life of Musashi, through this crazy guy at the bookstore whose name was Ishmael, which is certainly not his name. I read Musashi. I was having a sort of a span of Asiaphilia, right? I was interested in martial arts and had begun studying Taekwondo, and so I got this book Musashi and I read about it. In it, there was a Zen priest. A close friend of mine who was a guitar player, Rich Verone, had told me that there was this idea in some Buddhist practice called a koan, which he posed as a riddle that you can't solve with your intellect. And I was like, what? Oh, okay, I can solve. I'm going to solve. I'm on that. I can do that. I can make that shit. I can't wait. Like, let's go. And then I encountered the Zen priest who pretty much hates on Musashi the whole time. And Musashi is kind of an idiot in the beginning of the book, too. He's like a coward and a bully and stuff. And the Zen priest there's nothing really interesting about the Zen priest. But I get these wild romantic fantasies in my head, so I thought, like, I'm gonna sell all my stuff and move to Japan and go to a Zen temple. This is what I thought. And I get these weird things. I've been this way my whole life. I get this weird little idea in my head, and it just becomes like the most important thing, at least romantically. It doesn't mean I'm actually going to do it, but I like, I'm like, and so I go back to the bookstore, and Ishmael's like, so how did you like Musashi? And I was like, I really liked it. I think maybe I'm going to bring you all of my books, and then I'm going to move to Japan, and I'm going to join the Zen temple, he said. Okay. Well, you could do that. Or you could come back in about 20 minutes when I get off work, and we'll walk up the street and sit with my Zen teacher. It's like, what? Like a real Zen teacher? It's like, yeah, I have a real Zen teacher. And that's how I met John Tarrant Roshi, and that's how my meditation practice began. I was certainly very ardent and passionate about it. At first, it was very profound. There's this thing, okay, so there's a thing that in many meditation practices is referred to as beginner's mind. Did they speak at all to you about this? So it's the unique, as yet unfettered by either experience, expectation, or research, the sort of, blank slate, right? Like I'm just here to do the thing. And that often results in initial successes that are much less common as you proceed down the path. So a good teacher will be able to recognize when teacher is a somewhat conflicted word, but will recognize where the student's at and may be able to help them turn an initial success into an opening of some kind, right? Now, am I to understand that you were listening to recordings of a dead guy?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us more about that. Who?
Goenka.
Goenka.
Yeah,
Okay.
He brought Vipassana to the U.S.
From
India.
I
think.
When did he live?
I think he died in like 2013 or something. Yeah, I look it up. I'm not a great fact carrier.
I had a girlfriend around 97 who went to a Vipassana retreat, and she was also listening to recordings of the same guy.
It was recorded in 91.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think I'm happy to go down this road, but I think what you brought up about the meditation, how can you do that without desire? I think that would be a more interesting route.
Yeah.
So there's two ways I can answer that. There's my experience of what it's like to meditate without desire and without aversion, from my, experience, and also, well, we'll go down that route first. So, in Vipassana, they talk a lot about equanimity and presence, and how those things need to be together in order to meditate successfully. And so the equanimity is I'm watching the sensations of my body, and I'm not, and that includes intense physical pain. I mean, sitting that long and sitting crisscross applesauce with my back straight is not something I do.
Were you sitting in full lotus?
No, I was not sitting in full lotus.
Lotus?
I can do half lotus.
Okay.
But I was sitting just like this.
I see. Gotcha.
And so after a while, your feet are being crushed by your legs.
Yep.
Your hips, unless you do enough hip stretches, are being strained. And so...
I mean, you can actually suffer significant physical injury.
You can. And so the point is not to torture yourself.
Okay.
And there was a point where I really was like, I'm going to hurt myself, so I did move. But that was one out of all the rest of the 1 hour sits. I was as still as I possibly could be.
Sure.
And so that desire came up to think about things, desire to shift position, the aversion to the pain. It all came about. But eventually I was able to basically, instead of equanimity being what I was focusing on, not being adverse, not being desiring, but just observing objectively, it became something that I could sink into. And I had to focus less on equanimity. The pain was so intense, but I'm sitting there and I can trace the shooting pain up and down my legs and go deep into it and just watch. It's like those monks that self-immolate. I couldn't do that myself, but I see how they're able to do that. You can watch horrendous pain very objectively And so I got to the point where I'm not desiring anything. I'm not adverse to anything. And there were different instances when I got to that state. One of the instances, and this was the first instance, is I felt this energy, because you're watching the energy move throughout your body. I felt the energy clear in my chest. And so much love and compassion just started pouring out of me. It was like, in this moment, anything could happen, and I will meet it with just complete love. Like, I would give anything to someone who is in need, like, no question about it. And so, in that moment, I thought, oh, when desire and antipathy,
dissolve,
aversion are gone,
right.
It's just love, baby.
Yeah.
Except
that there is something personal about that, and I think it's important to just notice that.
What do you mean?
There's something related to you and your life path and your situation and your moment.
Yeah.
But I'm listening, please continue.
And so then the second time that I was able to get to that state, I'm watching, I was just completely numb. Like, I was thinking about my girlfriend, who I love very much. I was thinking about, what would happen if a little girl is on the street and needs my help. And it's just like, I'm just like feeling nothing. Granted, I'm thinking about these things. And so the lack of presence is what was, in my eyes, contributing to that lack of compassion that was coming out. So I'm very early on in this meditation practice. Just in general, I just got off this 10-day retreat, so I'm in 2 days. But I've continued it. I'm going to continue after this. The times that I've been able to be perfectly equanimous, I'm not desiring anything, I'm not adverse to anything, I'm simply watching what's happening, and I'm present. I'm not thinking, I'm there. It's just love. It's love for light. And it's not passionate. It's not like I'm in an ecstatic state. It is like a very just peaceful compassion. It's so easy to... there's a selflessness that comes about it that I've never experienced before. It's like... I'm ready to die at that point. And I'm sure if you tested that, it would be different. But because it's maintaining that state of being that's the tricky part as someone who's beginning. So I don't know where this is going to lead me. I don't know what I'm going to learn continuing this practice. But that alone is enough where I am so down with this technique. It has changed my life. And there's a lot of parts about the way that it was taught that I don't necessarily agree with. I think, but I'm very happy to have gone through this process. And so what you were saying about desire, how could you meditate without desire?
Really, what would draw you to any activity if you had neither desire nor aversion?
Compassion. Like,
maybe.
I believe through my experience so far that there is this love and compassion for life that persists beneath the craving and the aversion, the aversion that destabilize you.
So I might frame that as the memory of unity, or the natural state of communal awareness or concern, right? The concern for all beings in all of time. I like to include the whole temporal manifold.
Yeah.
Usually we say like all beings or whatever, but and of course we're taught this in Buddhism and so forth, but the language that I'm using comes from my direct experience of it. And none of us are born perfect, but many of us anyway, are born without intrinsic selfishness and with a concern for the welfare of others. As if perhaps we come to incarnation on some kind of a mission. I realize this starts to sound proselytic, but a mission to rebalance, to return to equanimity and wholeness, peacefulness, non-striving, and so forth. Because clearly we're born into a world that is profoundly conflicted, and filled with a myriad, like this cornucopia of appearances, many of which are violent or fierce or terrifying or disgusting or horrific, but also many of which ape or mimic beauty or mimic power or mimic enlightenment or and then I think there's so much going on here. We have, as humans, we have this weird feature that we sometimes refer to as the psyche, right? Which is this labyrinthine sort of hall of mirrors that often invert various myths and stories and principles that may display absences as presences, and above which there's this kind of gaze, right? This lighting, and that gaze can change. You can say, for example, well, what would other people think? Right, and so you're changing the gaze to the possibility of we must imagine critical others, because if you're not worried about critical others, you're not probably thinking about what other people would think, unless you are thinking about how to impress other people or how to look, how to engage in activities that would be lauded by the audience, right, by the masses. And look, there's a little bit of that in all of us. There's a little bit of performer in all of us.
For sure.
Different degrees and different modes of that performative urge in all of us.
I mean, we're on camera right now.
Exactly. And I've been a little bit of a... I mean, look, bluntly, we all have... Okay, I'll just talk about myself. There's a little bit of a drama queen in me. There's a little bit of a martyr in me. This has a lot to do with my personal mythos. We all forge life scripts in something resembling the transactional analysis sense, where as children, we try to find ways to cope with situations that we cannot control, because we are living in a world primarily controlled, we think, by adults. But actually, it turns out that the adults aren't in control either, and what seems to be in control are these dead processes that capture the humans and the adults and sort of subjugate them to the repetition of ghost-like zombie fucking shit that if anyone ever stopped for a moment to think about it, no one would do it even one more time.
Yeah.
Yet billions of people are reenacting it moment to moment all around us, and that creates a sort of a, not just an egregore, but a gravity, right? Like an iterative, behavioral, cyclic gravity of do the thing one more time, right? The fact that everybody around here thinks it's 8:02 p.m., right? And so at 8:02 p.m., sometime around 8, we usually blah, blah, blah. There's like 9 billion of us usually blah, blah, blahing at 8:02 p.m. You think like that's difficult to escape, right? Like that has real gravity.
For sure.
So, George, I think it's time for you to have a question or a comment, or you've been very patient so far. So.
Well, I wanted to hear more about what you think you defect from in language. What are you escaping from?
Okay, so if I were to be really authentic, I'd probably just be either crying or laughing or sleeping, or just loving you so much that it would be sloppy. Like honestly, and that would be kind of embarrassing because we're not really supposed to do that. Now, if we had an orienting milieu that was intelligent, right, where we have a way of caring for each other and our milieu, our context together, moment to moment, day by day, then we could just authentically sink into that, and there'd be a lot less of Darren pontificating about the nature of cognition and intelligence and non-human, intelligences. And not that all that's, I'm not trying to totally make fun of myself. Obviously, the things that I'm passionate about, I truly care about. But I notice that if I feel uncomfortable or vulnerable, or even if I don't know what to do with myself, like I'm just not sure how to physically be here safely, coherently, presently in the moment, I'm going to start trying to entertain you and myself. And one of the ways that I will do that is articulate, intellectual inquiry.
Yeah.
And recapitulation, exploration, all these things.
I see.
How about you? Do you defect? I mean, how do you? What are some of your If you defect at all, what are some of the methods you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, deflection, I think, is an aspect of language. We can use language to avoid our problems. So, yeah, I totally understand that. I experience language as like a work of art. So I derive a lot of pleasure from constructing beautiful speech. I think in terms of symmetries, and I experience symmetries kinesthetically. So I think of intellectual exercises like reading as almost like a form of dance, I think. And I've thought that for a long time.
I think for you it is. I mean, I don't think you're just thinking that.
No.
Please continue.
No. I think in my perfect world, I could speak poetically in the midst of an environment in which my movement actually mattered. My movement actually affected the outcome of some process that I could then behold and appreciate.
Okay, this is very profound, because what you're talking about is a sort of psychokinesthetic intimacy with time and matter, in which the entire historical continuum leads into profound expressions of presence in activation or something.
Like, that's what I think it means to be human. Like, that's what we should be doing. That's what I feel inclined to be doing.
So tell us more about tell us, by all means, tell us some more about that, George, because that's brilliantly astonishing and very uncommon to most humans. And yet, having known you now for a few months, and we've spent quite some time in conversation, I find your ways of thought and purposive relation to be both astonishingly uncommon and deeply, I don't even know what the word is, like, invocative at this, invocative, evocative at the same time. So yes, by all means.
Well, language, I think, should be totally embodied. Language should be a physical exercise that results in environmental effects. I think that language probably arose in the context of something like song or rhythm or poetry. So, I really suspect that singing was the origin of conceptualization. So I really think that rhyming or rhythm was the basis of this kind of primeval sense of correspondences in our environment or within nature. So,
I can't help but hear chorus spondences.
Right.
Like the chorus of us together. And also, I don't know if you've ever had this experience of being actually taken over by the possibility of the rhyming intelligence, so that you just start vocalizing in a way. You can't help it. You couldn't possibly compose it if you tried.
Yes.
There's no chance of you doing that intentionally. And when we were speaking earlier about the tag that we use to point at the muse or a muse, this is fundamental. I've only had a very few vocal experiences of this, maybe 7 to 10 of them. I have one of them recorded, which later I'll play for you guys if you want to hear it. It's a little bit embarrassing, but just absolutely something just took me over. And what comes out is more than human. So have you had an experience of that where you're speaking and the rhyming, poetic aspect becomes primally expressed?
I think to some extent, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I've had pretty extensive
Yeah,
experience.
I'm not surprised at all that you might have that, because I've been around, like you and I have played around a little bit with just random utterances and playful. Please say more though.
So, I've had experiences irregularly where I wouldn't even have been able to mention this, but retroactively I can realize where I literally speaking from the heart, not thinking. It is like I somehow have managed in my depression, in my like manic craziness, to find myself in a state where my heart is opened up and I'm calm and relaxed, and someone like has a problem and I'm just like waxing poetic and they're like, oh my God, like it's gospel, it's amazing. And it was I could not have recreated it if I tried, and I have tried. It doesn't work.
Nope.
And then when I got to writing poetry on the street, when my intention was not to make money, it was not to, I even said, you can give if you want, but you don't have to. And the purpose of that is because if I'm trying to sell poetry, it is a total block of that stream of consciousness. And my intention is not to write some epic poem so people can go, oh, you're so amazing. It's really like, I would write on a piece of paper, please let me help people with my words, and then I would burn it. And that was like my ritual. It was like, people come and hopefully when I ask them what they want the poem to be about, they will say something, and then my conversation with them will be a vector for helping. And it was those moments, plenty of moments where I'm getting in the way of myself, and I have that like, oh shit, this has to be good, and it didn't turn out great, but there were those sweet, delicious moments where it was just flowing out of my fingers, and boom, I hand it to them, and I knock their socks off, and it's like, oh, I'm so happy that I could have helped this person.
Not only that, like, what would I rather be doing?
Right.
There's nothing,
Right.
like, I mean, it's better, it's as good as some of the best things, I won't mention them by name, that we can possibly imagine. We have this idea, I think this is actually relevant to the entire conversation, so I know about my own behavior that I can displace into intellectual, not defect, but displace, right, into intellectual, articulate speech. But there's lots of other things I can do. That's not the only thing I do with language by a long shot, right? That's something I'm concerned about because I feel that I'm nervous about being present. I don't feel comfortable just being, right? So, but we are inclined to think that poets and writers are people who sit down and intentionally compose things. It's not that that doesn't happen, but there are a lot of other things that can happen. And some of those things are truly magical in the sense that they transcend our capacity to explain or describe the process whereby they occur. Please, George, help me out here. Say more.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned sound symbolism before.
Yes. I brought this up in a video I made yesterday, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm all with you on this topic.
Yeah. As opposed to detaching us from our environment, language, I think, can reveal something about our very embodiment, our very nature as physical beings. Insofar as the sounds that our mouths can make might intrinsically carry meanings in the same way that light, I think, also carries meanings.
And form can carry meanings, and
Yeah.
color,
Yeah.
and distance, and proximity, and relational. Yes, brilliant. Agreed.
So I think in our everyday life, in modern culture, we use language in particular ways which might be falling short of its true potential or even its origin, I think. I think language originally connected us to nature. That's my point, I guess.
So, in the same way that I've heard you say, George, so many astonishing things that I find enlightening and profound and often shocking and unexpected, which, to be very clear with you, my own experience is broad and deep. I mean, I've had direct, long-term experience of contact with profoundly, I don't even know how to describe it, a non-human intelligence of unimaginable sophistication. And every once in a while I come across human beings that have some, that remind me of some feature of this intelligence. And I have come to wonder of late, really for the first time, like I think the first thing that I began to think was that our ancestors were probably commonly in contact, not in contact with, they were intimately involved with other kinds of intelligences in consciousness at all times. As if I had, for example, a thing, let's use a trope that's familiar so that it's not too hard to understand. Let's say that I actually had a way to stop that man from making that noise.
You would do it.
I would probably do it. Although, you know, it's not as bad as it is sometimes. Let's say that I... Okay, what's so ironic about that, I just want to explain something really briefly, and then I'll return to my topic. One of the objects that most resembles the relationship between an angel and a human mind is a man on a motorcycle. Okay? And that's so ridiculous because it's also ironically completely nothing like it. But the problem is that you have these wheels, and the wheels have spokes in them, and when the spokes turn, they create this disc, and the disc, you know, I'm going to just stop there. Let's suppose that our ancestors had at least three things, okay? They had a personal angel that would be like my guardian angel, right? And my guardian angel is friends with your guardian angels, so they all know each other. There's a personal one. And then there's a communal intelligence that everybody also can access, right? And then there's a sort of a genius loci, this place, our world, that mountain, this river, right? This the genius of this, of the history of this living place and our relationship with it. And then, even a fourth thing, this becomes like the Spanish Inquisition in Monty Python. The sky, right? Or pieces of the sky, the Pleiades. If you check in with indigenous people, most of them have a way of understanding pieces of the sky as being transcendentally important, and the Pleiades are one of those pieces. The Dipper stars are another one of those. The Dipper stars and the Pleiades stars, for example, in the Blackfoot, are particularly important. And so is the Milky Way, which they call the Wolf Path. But when they say the Wolf Path, it's nothing like white people would be thinking what they mean. There's no chance of you, as an ordinary colonially educated white person, your chances of understanding what is meant by the Wolf Path are zero. You're not going to get anywhere near it. It might have something to do with wolves, but not in the way you're thinking. And whatever path means, it means something like, I mean, I'm not going to say what it means to the Blackfoot people, that's not for me to say, but it means something like, imagine that transcendental intelligence is involved in the formulation of the nature of the universe and time-space. We're talking stuff that nebulae are the expression of, right? That stars and worlds and organisms are the reflection in a kind of living water of, right? When they say, if I were to say like the wolf path, what I might mean is the shape of the evanescent lightning in the sky that the intelligences use to draw themselves down into relation with material beings, and that material beings use to draw themselves up beyond their humanity into those relationships, okay? So this is the kind of slightly insane sounding stuff that I think is important for us to consider. Okay, where am I going here? Now, I've known intelligences in nature. You also have had the experience of having a creature sort of download into you what it means to be, for example, a snake.
Yep.
One particular snake. It's okay if I name the snake?
Sure. Yeah.
Pepper, right? So you had this experience with Pepper, which you can describe if we get there. I've had this experience with various other creatures, sometimes creatures who are dying, when I am in travail and don't know what the hell... like, my mind is in a crisis because I can tell the creature's dying, and they're trying to transmit to me the entirety, not just of their life experience, but of the life experience of their people, right? Specifically, there was an event that absolutely destroyed everything I ever thought about anything that happened between me and a dying wasp, where it was
What was the wasp's name?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks a lot, bro. Appreciate that. Right? Slap upside the head. Well, the wasp wasn't a pet, so it didn't have a name. Are we cool now?
Did you pet the wasp?
Well, it was dying.
Yeah.
It was a queen yellow jacket or paper wasp, and had been poisoned in the previous year.
I'm just interested in the semantics of animals.
I see. So, over a period of less than 3 seconds, the creature just seemed to download into me not just its history, but the entire history of its species. And the epic nature of that experience was, I mean, if you took the sum of human heroic stories, those things would look like, I don't know, an ant's fart compared to what this thing put into my mind in less than a few seconds, and made me feel the whole thing. It doesn't require thousands of years to absorb billions of lifetimes of experience. Whatever we think we are as humans, it has nothing to do with what the fuck is actually going on. Nothing. Like the stories we tell ourselves. I'm going to stop blathering in a moment. It's as if what I would refer to as human knowledge is like a disease that every time you touch it, it chops off one of your limbs. And you just keep touching it, and it just keeps chopping until there's no limbs or abilities or affordances or senses or intelligences left, right? And then it starts chopping at the absences that it created by the like it just keeps fucking crippling you every time you touch it. And this is what human knowledge, quote unquote, mostly is, and it apes excellence. Like, we can build computers,
right?
Atomic bombs,
Right.
Help me out, guys. But the reason that I brought this up is that both of you, in your own way, you're like NHIs. I'm trying to say that I think we were born to draw intelligences down into us and then express them, and this has been long forgotten. We were born to become something that makes demigods cry into their palm and pee their diapers. And meanwhile, we're sitting here going like, do, selfie, fucking blah, blah. Right? It's so tragic. And I'd like us, especially now in a time when our entire world is under threat of being exterminated, the entire history of the ecologies is hanging under like 19,000 different fucking pendulous knives that the humans keep fucking with. It might be a good time to start to remember how to do this together. So that's one of the things. And you guys both remind me of this almost like you're both right on the verge. You're like bubbling at the edge of the fucking memory. You're like just waiting for the lightning to come, and fucking you grow 9 kinds of wings, and there's a messianic aspect to human existence that we have overlooked for the sake of safety and propriety. What about that?
Well, before I become the next Messiah, I'm going to continue this meditation technique, and maybe it'll get me there. But everything you just said is answered for me by this meditation technique of Vipassana. You talk about engaging with the wasp, and you're so like messed up about like, oh my god, it's gonna die. You're talking about how we're just bumbling and blathering. I mean, that to me is this addiction to desire and aversion. It's the distraction. It's this crazy relationship to the ever-changing nature of reality that when it's gone, we become vessels for this compassion. We allow these things like whatever muse, whatever direction we want. And so my MO for, I don't know, the past 2 years has been leading towards like altruism, compassion. And so of course when I get out of my own way, I can sink into this, place of love that is otherwise inaccessible when I'm fearfully averse to things.
Okay, but I need to challenge you in a couple ways there.
Yeah.
I don't need to. That's the wrong language. I would like to, or I feel the desire to.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm not being equanimous, but there's a couple things I see. So the first is, let's suppose that there's at least 2 modes, and we'll say there's 7, but let's start with 2, right?
Right.
One is the mode of the... Okay, oh, this is so sophisticated. So, the being who dwells in intimate communion, remembering all beings in stillness, right? So if I choose this path for myself now here, by the way, I love this little moth that's like sort of fluttering around with us. It's awesome.
Aren't they symbols of change?
Yeah, there's symbols of lots of stuff that we could go into, but that would be distracting. But yeah, I'm just celebrating the moth. All right, so one path is the one who in silent stillness is like a transformative spiritual power that encompasses the whole world and all of history, right? It just like that person is a sort of a saint, right? They're resolving through interior beauty and stillness and profound anamnoetic recollection, right? Unforgetting and recollecting at the same time, right? That person is just shining like a light. Absolutely beautiful, right? Absolutely altruistic. No need to do anything, right? Because the thing you are doing all things by doing no things, in this sense. One can be understood this way. And yet, the creation, the existence as it seems to be, is complex. And there are situations that require interaction, or that at least we can imagine would benefit from interaction, so that you yourself, after having the experience of meditation, you do not want to just become the glowing presence of perfect stillness and anamnoetic recollection. You want to have that as a basis, and then from that move into the world and enact things, right? No?
Well, so I'm talking about states of being that I've been in, where as far as I can tell, and I'm fairly confident that I have not been desiring anything or adverse to anything. I am objectively watching. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm watching the sensations of my body. I'm watching them arise in me. And what happens is sometimes pains in the body will speak to you in a way, and they will bring up memories that you've completely repressed. And it's for me, it's often, you're not repressing good memories usually. It's like shit it's the reason we run away with intellect. It's the reason we run away with drugs. It's like, it fucking sucks to look at, but when you're in that equanimous state, you can watch it objectively.
It's also safe to do so. It's relative. You feel like held by the stillness.
Absolutely. And so these things bubble up, they surface, they transform, they're gone. You've made peace with it. There's deeper roots, but at some point, nothing is bubbling up for me. That compassion, I just sink into it. I might be equanimous, and I might not be thinking, but I still have beliefs about the world. I still believe that and I don't even really I don't trust the word belief, because but, you know.
We could call them biases.
Biases, ignorances.
I
don't know a lot about the world.
Yeah, no.
And so I'm still using old software.
Me too.
I'm using the same hardware. I have a different relation to it now. I'm not I can see, but I'm still subject to bias. It's like, I'm not saying that I have it all figured out, but I have a way of relating and getting back to presence that I didn't normally have. And I'm already seeing enormous benefits and enormous ways in which this can still go about. So I'm not eradicating my mind, but I am purifying it in that way.
Let me try to clarify what I was saying.
Sure.
There's a difference between a saint and a hero.
Okay.
Right? The hero goes forth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're like, I'm gonna be doing some stuff now.
Right.
Let's go. And the saint doesn't have to go forth.
Mm-hmm.
The saint, they're both very powerful, right? And I think we have both aspects in us, and it's not just these two. Like I said, there's 7 things we could talk about here, okay? And it's important to realize it's not 2. It's not a binary choice. But the stillness of the saint, I've seen people, I know, like Ramakrishna, or, Dogen, or Joshu, or probably Saint Teresa of Avila. There are these people who have lived, and they just become this like shining light that metabolizes the suffering of beings and just churns out liberation and rejuvenation and resurrection and insight and awakening and healing. And it's not perfect, right? It's not perfect. But there are these beings that do this. And then there are also beings who they do, oh God, there's so many things they can do, but I'm trying to keep this simple. There are beings who establish the root of beingness, presence.
Yep.
And then what they do is they meditate, and then they go into life and they act.
Yeah.
And then they return to the meditation,
right.
and they reorient,
right.
and remember.
That's what I'm doing.
I know.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. So what I was trying to say is, I was talking about a moment in history now where the whole fucking the possibility of humans existing is on the chopping block.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I don't have a position necessarily in terms of like what I think should be going on. Like, what should you do? That's for you to figure out. But in this case, we might need some action. Right? Like, we might want to be like, that meditation stuff is really good, but if we don't have a world to do that on, that could be a problem. So this is what I was saying when I was saying, like, when I see you both unique, and me, right, we're sort of bubbling at the edge of the possibility of calling down the ancients from before and after in the sky, and becoming avatars. And also the thing we were talking about earlier about the muse, right? Just like taking over our speech. And I'd like to think that that's part of what I'd like to think. What a shitty way to say something. I'm not unsure. This guy is such a character. As if he grabbed it quickly enough, it could undo time. And I could just rewind that thing. That never happened, bro. Like, I'm good. Right? Which is what happens if you look at a cat, which makes like some sort of kinesthetic mistake in its movement, and it looks at you like, oh, you didn't see that.
Do you know I'm weak?
Right? Yeah, no, that didn't happen, bro. I was just forget about that. Let's go on to the grace of my next movement. Okay, George, help us out. Reorient us. Give us the juice.
Oh man, the juice.
Yeah, the purple. So you were talking earlier about the way that language can become a kind of a path into transcendental enaction of the potentials, not merely of our humanity, but of our transcendental aspect, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's part of my own practice.
I have the experience of you succeeding at that relatively regularly, so I'm all with you.
Interesting. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah. So, like, to what extent is technology the embodiment of an absence? So that question, I think, is
The embodiment of a what?
An absence.
an absence. So,
Oh, that's the thing I was going to say earlier. I'll be very brief here. You spoke a couple days ago of a topic that completely blew my mind right out the back of my skull. You were like, if light starts to depart, you get images. What? Images are the departure of the light?
right. Yeah.
My God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please continue. I'm going to just please continue. I need to take care of a modest insectival situation here.
What is it?
I believe it's the kind of a creature that sucks your blood in the night, after
Oh,
which vampires
interesting.
are named. But let's find out if I'm right about this. I could entirely be confused. No, I don't think so. It might be a creature, but oh yeah, it was one of those. All right. Well, let me just take that little
Okay.
juicy bit of insectival gore outside instead of destroying it. Yeah, I'll tell the story of the Hard-Nosed Society later if you remind me. But please continue. I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah. So the idea is just that images result from modulations of the external matter field, which is essentially holographic. So as a whole, the universe is essentially non-imageable. Images arise through variable timescales that result from falling away from the perspective of light. So, that would be the core idea, I suppose.
There's too many words there that I don't have a innate understanding of.
Sure.
So
Yeah. I mean, it helps to walk through the experiments, like with the prism, to develop a concrete, imaginal, sense of how light and matter arise together. So that kind of procedure, I think, really helped me understand. Or just, play with certain concepts. So, experience, I think, is always the root of these more theoretical insights.
Yeah.
As you were saying, everything that I know is really downstream from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I use language to structure and to articulate just experiences that I've had. So
The departure of liberty resulting in structure, which can seem to be a trap or a loss of liberty, and yet from that structured position gives us the potential to establish new forms of liberty previously unimagined.
Yep.
This is something Arthur Young speaks of in The Reflexive Universe. I had been shown a similar principle by the non-human intelligence I refer to as Toymaker, but Young's articulation of this is profound. And by the way, the creature wasn't a mosquito, it was the little moth that had been...
Oh,
good.
Yeah. But I think it's good that it went outside, because now it will survive and, mate and things.
Yeah, good stuff.
In any case, right. So, say something about how the departure of light results in images, and therefore how the departure of a kind of freedom in the mind may result in language, and yet that could be beneficial. Help me out.
Interesting. So a beam of light really contains a spatial image, which I think is obscured by the Newtonian perspective on color. So when you look at a beam of light as it passes through a prism, you might imagine that the beam of light is some kind of objectively existent entity moving through space.
Is there indeed a beam of light?
No.
Okay, please continue.
So it not in the sense of some object, right? So
a distinct, ray.
Right. Yeah. Like, so Goethe was extremely skeptical of the ray concept, which I think makes a lot of sense. So basically, Newton was attempting to reify the rays that Kepler proposed in order to explain certain harmonies between the planets in our solar system. So Newton was trying to prove that Kepler was correct in a certain sense. I think that was his main motivation for developing these, or reifying these mathematical concepts like rays, right? Okay. Really, a beam of light always possesses some width. So a ray is really just a pencil like that you can draw on a piece of graph paper. But the width of a beam of light is important to understand, as Descartes did, because that area conceals a highly compressed image of space. So the
holy shit! So you're saying in the beam of light, there's something like a hologram, or no?
Well, light,
say what
I think,
you mean.
is holographic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant by saying an image of space, or did I misunderstand you?
No, I think you understood me.
Okay, continue, please. It's really hard to understand which space the image is of.
Right. So if you imagine, the Newtonian experiment with the camera obscura or the dark chamber, the beam of light really issues from a material body. So the hole in the canvas is a kind of material body that contains an image of the sun. So the beam of light that Newton works with is really an image of the sun in a highly compressed state, because
Are there any beams of light around here that don't originate in the sun?
Oh, here, yeah. I mean, everything indirectly or ultimately originates from the sun, but yeah.
Right, because we have like light bulbs and stuff like that, right? Or computer screens or whatever. Yeah. But then we also have living eyes. And we might imagine that the living eyes are literally physical extensions of the solar expression or formation of the please, you've got something in mind. Yeah.
Which it is. It is an expression of the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, these lights are directly. I mean, we burn dead animals, and then it takes a long path to get to here.
Right. But
please continue. Well, the key insight, I think, is to understand that light never actually propagates through space.
Yeah, we agree about that. I never thought that what light did was traveling. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I was pretty sure it wasn't movement. Go ahead.
Right. So light is essentially polarized in two dimensions. So it can move back and forth. It can move up and down, but it cannot move forward and backward. So whatever light does, it never moves forward or backward. It never moves through space in a certain sense, right?
So then how do I understand like light years? Like we're seeing, or even just the 8-minute delay between the sun and
right. So yeah, it's interesting. So I think in terms of variable timescales, which we can definitely explore. So I think the scale of time that we perceive is a function of something within the external matter field, and it has a wave-like structure. So frequency is really a measurement of time. So frequency is measured in cycles per second, so that unit of the second is really a reference to what we call time. So when I think of waves, I really think of something temporal because, frequency is a measure of time. So,
but without frequency, there would be no time. You'd have no, it's not a measure. No, there's a huge problem here, isn't there? There's a big fucking problem here, isn't there?
Well, let's hear what you say.
Okay, so without frequency, how would you have time in which to analyze the frequency? Like, you have to start somewhere, and it looks like it starts with frequency, not time. Like, how do you get time without the iterative, right? How do you get, what is time? So, okay, let me ask you a kind of a seemingly dumb question. Let's imagine a universe in which there's just one object. And there's not even a context. right? Okay, there's just one thing. Can you have time there?
Yes.
Wow. Really?
Yes.
Show me your fucking thinking. I can't wait to see this. This is gonna fuck me up for sure.
Yeah, so the perception of the present moment, I think, is due to a dislocation. So basically due to an interval or a gap. So I think in our culture we tend to think of time as a kind of line which might be segmented or which might consist of homogeneous units like seconds, or in the same way that we can apply a meter to space, we can subordinate space to some kind of common unit of measurement or metric.
It's a very cruel and sort of dommy way to think about things, but yes.
Yeah.
We're subordinating the things to the measurement. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because we talked about this, but
We did.
if you look at a physical interaction, so what you might think about is causality, cause and effect. So if you observe some kind of physical collision in space, the separation between cause and effect is effectively non-existent. So what you see is an instantaneous change by virtue of some physical or chemical interaction. So
Okay.
yeah, so we can infer the existence of causes and effects from that simultaneity, from the simultaneous transfer of energy between two material bodies, if you were to...
I absolutely support and honor your explication. However, you can have no disjunction in a universe with one thing. There's no lag, there's no gap, there's no interval. How do you get time in a universe with one thing? And one thing only. No context, just one thing.
The thing itself, I think, is a function of a time scale. So it's a scale of time.
So time pre-exists things. Because what I was shown is if you don't have a second thing to compare to, you can't have time. Show me how that's wrong, please. Now look.
What do you mean by a second thing?
Okay. So first of all, I don't want to force our amazing, discussion and conversation along one particular path. We can dispose of this for the sake of other insights. But it occurs to me that in a universe that is, for example, a single molecule without a context, or not even that, because a molecule has components. Let's call it a decomposable object, a non-decomposable object with no components, right? There's nothing...
Yeah, but again, I see an organism as a non-decomposable object.
I know, but you're a raging prodigy that shouldn't even exist. Like, the fact that you exist at all is a violation of so many principles of time, space, and knowledge and intellect that you're just a fucking standing wave of anomalies, having a clusterfuck right in front of me.
I think an object needs qualities. So if you were to subtract qualities from an object and ask me, just an object with no decomposable components.
There's no such thing. It's not a possible
reject
thing.
that even exists.
Okay, yeah, that's reasonable. I'm not unreasonable at all. Okay, let me try to explain what I'm saying. Actually, I now see a problem with the supposition that I've long been following, which is really what I'm hoping to discover, because if I want to have insight, I'm going to have to see something I haven't seen before. I must escape the biases in whose bondage I have previously existed, right? But what I imagined was I never actually had to state this formally before, but I imagined a non-decomposable substance with no parts, of infinite extent, and no context against which it can be measured. I love how he laughs when I say this.
It's just so absurd. It's just, what the fuck are we talking about? Where are we?
Yeah. No, but I think that's what an organism is.
No, it isn't. Wait, what? Say more.
So, if you look at the parts of an organism, every part only exists with reference to every other part.
We agree. So when people say the brain is the seed of blah blah blah, I'm like, really? Okay, so you think the brain's by itself? Because the brain and the heart are the same
Right.
organ, and the lungs and the pancreas and the fucking duodenum and the esophagus, and I mean, which part isn't the brain? Show me one that isn't.
Right. So an organism really is non-decomposable because it exists only as a unit.
I know, but it's so counterintuitive to we who live in the time of objects composed artificially by humans.
Right. Yeah.
All my skin. I just lost a bunch of skin cells, so there's some parts of me that are non-essential. You know.
Are you actually itchy, or are you just goofing around?
I'm just goofing around.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let me try to say.
Well, no, but I'm curious. It's not what part isn't the brain, but you're saying non-decomposable. To me, like
I know, but what he's saying is that nothing's decomposable.
nothing, or just organisms?
No, I think you're saying there's no decomposing, except as a convenience of thought.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have I got you wrong?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. I agree with him.
Gotcha.
I agree with him. That's why I said that whatever the fuck is going on is transcendental to all models. There's no way you're going to encompass that which is, right, with models.
Mm-hmm.
Models are toys with which you pretend to you acquire potentially useful perspectives on features of existence, which is probably nothing going on at all. Fundamentally zero and zippity pop. I don't actually believe that, but I can imagine it. All right, let me just try very briefly to say something. If you only have one object and nothing with which to compare it, and no one to observe it, you can't have time. Time is always going to be a relationship between two or more things. I love how this fucks with my so much fun. Do you understand though why I might be confused in that way? If in fact you think I'm confused? Because time is a relational thing between at least two things, right? You have to have at least two. And the reason that I think that in a way has to do with relativity's idea of world lines, right? Like, I seem to think it is consonant. God, we should be much more Socratic in asking questions. We should be much more like Maieutic I should be more Maieutic. I wish I could. But I'm going to go ahead and keep making stupid statements like an idiot drunkenly stumbling down a path that leads to a cliff off of which I fall into stupidity. And nonetheless,
well, I mean, relativity is all about making comparisons because, I mean, Einstein tried to develop relativity in order to synchronize clocks between two reference frames.
okay, so that's
the point.
super fucking important what you just said there. Because there's no way to synchronize clocks, really, at all.
Okay.
You can't fucking do it. Right? So it's a hopeless mess. And what it is, in a way, is that if we think about time biorelationally, then each participant is a unique temporal reference frame. And our bodies are the field effect of the combination of the reference frames of approximately 70 trillion cells, approximately 45 trillion of
But again,
which...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
A reference frame is really an abstraction. What you mean is like an organism. What you mean is
Yeah,
a body.
I do. But this is the thing. An organism isn't a fucking machine.
Right.
And I don't care what machines detect. They detected things with machines. Oh, yeah, I love it. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, what?
Right.
No, detection with machines is an illusion.
You need a theory of perception, I think,
Okay.
in order to make relativity physically sensible.
What I'm trying to say that's kind of weird, the reason that I'm biased in this way is that I have an affinity, right, to a bias. And I'm very, like, I have a girlfriend in my thinking. And the girlfriend is, one moment in your body is more time than the humans think has existed in the entire history of the universe. That's the girlfriend I have. Because it's 70 trillion cells and a bagillion viruses as potentially individual temporal bubbles interrelating. And the speed of time for a single cell is much faster than it is for us. I don't care what the interval we pick is, seconds, minutes, whatever, doesn't matter. So you got this unimaginable I mean, 1 year of human time is 8 billion individual human life years without measuring the relationships between the 8 billion humans, without measuring the relationships between them and all the other organisms on Earth, etc. So I think of this idea of birelational time, and I get really excited, and my brain gets a sort of, erection or whatever. I'm sorry.
But so, like, what do you do with that perspective? Because I'm not experiencing that.
Really? I think when you sit and you're meditating and you feel what you call presence, you're experiencing that.
Sure. And I have the zoom in and zoom out effect, so I can zoom out on my whole body and I lose precision for more awareness of the tingling sensations. And then I can zoom in on just a very small area.
Surely you don't think cells don't exist.
I think cells exist.
Okay, what about you?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen them, I've flaked it off my skin, looked at them under microscopes.
Me too, yeah. So I think there are cells. I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they are beings.
Right.
I do. And there are more beings inside you than you can imagine. There are more beings inside you than there have ever been humans, than there ever will be humans. And those beings are having relational experiences over the span of a second that are so profound and shocking that they make the whole endeavor of science look stupid, like not even interesting. Those beings are older than anything you can possibly understand. And if we're incapable of becoming aware of that, then we are being blinded by something. We're being blinded by the supremacy of the superposition over the cells that we call ourselves, which is hilarious. Ourselves? Really? Are you fucking kidding? Who made this shit up? You couldn't fucking make shit up. That's ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
What? Okay, help me out. Whatever you got. I'm gonna be quiet now.
Yeah, qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I think that our image of space is primarily qualitative. What we perceive are qualities. Whereas British empiricism, and therefore modern science, introduced the idea that there ought to be some fundamental distinction between quantities and qualities. So the point of science is to quantify qualities. The point of science is to take qualities and transform them into quantities that we can share and discuss, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
How dare you say that? I'm surprised that the universe is allowing you to continue to exist right now, honestly, but keep going, yeah.
Yeah, so we tend to think that space is some kind of easily computable structure. So I can just apply a yardstick to some extension of space that consists of these homogeneous units, right?
Mm-hmm.
We tend not to think that, for example, a twisting motion through space is something like qualia, or that the texture of velvet is something like qualia. We think that colors are qualia. We think that tastes are qualia.
Flavors. Yeah, flavors, but not transformations.
Right, but so the twisting of a leaf as it falls from a tree, I think actually is as much qualia as like the taste of cauliflower or the perception of red, because they both involve this kind of deeper holographic field.
Okay, but the difference between red flavor and the twisting of the leaf is the transformation over time.
Yeah. So there's
red doesn't really have a transformation over time. Neither does flavor does, but we don't usually think of it that way. When we speak of the flavor of an almond, we don't usually think of an onset. If we're Epicureans, or if we're what are the guys who give people wine? What are they called?
Wine givers.
Yeah, the wine givers. That's it. They know that there's like sommeliers.
Sommeliers.
Yeah, they know that there's like a waveform of the onset, the emergence of various flavors over time.
Mm-hmm.
Ordinarily, when we think of simple qualia like red or the taste of an apple, we don't usually think that way. The spiral of belief forces us to think that way.
Right. Yeah. So the spiraling motion, I think, is a function of a scale of time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you change the scale of time, that motion changes.
All right.
So
I need to ask you this because to me, when I think of time, I think of a relationship between at least two things. And I think of lag, meaning that you must be lower than whatever light is doing to have anything like time.
Right.
All right, so I want to ask you, what is time?
not space. So in order for there to exist, in order for there to be two things, I think there needs to be something like space.
You don't believe that time-space, as proposed by Einstein, as indissolubly. You don't buy
I reject the idea that we should be spatializing time. We should be doing the opposite. We should be temporalizing space.
Okay, so what is time? And also, is it a being? What, like, give me the fucking category. What is that stuff?
Yeah, so I would agree with you that, as far as I can tell, the perspective of light must be devoid of time.
There's a position above time, we might say, or outside of time, which, by the way, Hillman calls aeonic.
Right. So when I think of time, I think simply of an image. So.
Wow.
So this image.
Is time the possibility of an image?
No, I think time really is the image itself. So every image is temporal, in my view.
Oh shit!
Yeah. So every image is temporal, not static.
Is time the departure of light?
Yeah, I think time probably results from the decreasing speed of light or falling away from light.
Okay.
Yeah. So as you move away from the perspective of light, you see images along a certain gradient. So what you see is a function of the scale, so really a function of your proximity to that null scale of time.
So time is a function of a certain array of modes of degradation of light.
Yeah.
Okay, what is light?
Yeah, so so light and space appear to be two aspects of the same underlying entity which is invisible. So this entity never incarnates as an object or as something perceptible, but this entity, I think, underpins both space and light, because space and light co-arise. They arise
It's not
together.
that it underpins it. It's that their possibilities emerge from this entity as natural expressions of its undiscoverable nature, origin, and behavior.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So,
is time a being or a situation? Or both? Or something more? Don't let me trap you. Find your own way.
right. So you mentioned this metaphor involving strobing lights,
Mm-hmm.
which I think
The
makes a lot of
dandelion
sense.
toy.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, just to be really clear, that's a situation in which everything in the universe is expanding to distinction and contracting to perfect unity outside of time, unimaginable amounts of times per whatever interval you pick. So most of the time, it's in transit between unity and distinction, and the appearance of solidity is like the persistence of vision effect with light. There's nothing here. There's nothing making the sound. There's nothing there at all. Most of what's going on is just the transition between distinction and unity. Everything is one speck most of the time. Go ahead.
I see. Okay. The phases of matter that we experience or that we perceive, I think, can be understood by analogy with what you mentioned. So, symmetry, I think, is what underpins what we perceive as a certain state of matter, whether solid, liquid, or gas.
Hmm.
So I suspect that space is a kind of holographic structure that contains more than one possible reconstruction of the past, because
Oh my God.
what we perceive as our present environment is always a past image. So
Right.
we only ever perceive the past.
Not only
So-
that, it would be impossible to understand anything we perceive without a historical milieu in which to understand it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You'd have to have, like, no memory, no things. You're good luck. You got nothing.
Yeah.
But keep going. So, again, is time a situation? What is it? A being? A comparison between things? A set of qualitative relationships? How do you understand it yourself?
Yeah, not a set of relationships. Although, yeah, Leibniz, but yeah, I mean, I like Leibniz.
Although Leibniz, yeah, but
I like Leibniz.
No, I like Leibniz too.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
the
I
dude is-
really just think of time in terms of a transforming image. So time is essentially indivisible. So as a flow, time is an indivisible motion. So
right, like the movement of a river without quantizing it.
Yeah.
No
Yeah, without-
quantization.
Without a uniform, homogeneous metric devoid of qualities, because space itself is totally qualitative.
Oh my God.
So
You're like a ballerina of intellect. It's insane to watch your mind work. I mean, I hope that was a compliment. Okay, light. Evidence of a being. Okay, are there transcendental beings? What's going on?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
only,
think...
only because of my experiences,
Yeah, but your
Might be
intuitions, too.
Yeah.
Which experiences led you to believe there might be transcendental beings? To whatever degree you may be willing or have the patience to share about those.
Yeah, I mean, having just seen over the course of my life certain beings that defy.
Category?
Yeah.
Categorization?
Right.
In the human lexicon?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Me too. I mean, not so much seeing, but knowing them in my mind. I mean, knowing one of them, well, two of them actually, in a sequence. One which I mistrusted, one which I trusted. It's useful to have both experiences. Is light the result of the nature or activity? Okay, one of the things I've sometimes said is that minds are like a side of... Okay, you know how there's a certain branch of cognitive, or there are neuroscientists, there are people who claim to be neuroscientists, like Daniel Dennett, who say that there's no such thing as consciousness. It's just an epiphenomenon of the function of the brain, right? It's like the brain makes exhaust, and that's what, the brain's function makes this exhaust that we call consciousness. And my friend, Dr. B, who we listened to earlier, is furious about this idiotic idea, and also hates the concept of brains in vats, right? People who talk about the brain like it's a separate thing all by itself and outside of the body. But, where am I going here? Okay, the sun, even if there is nothing like gods or angels or the sun, and there must be structures in time-space. As the humans might think an ant is to us, there must be structures in time-space that are to the sun as we are to ants, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, the sun and the earth are formations, processes, more than merely beings, who, whatever they are up to, their activities, their fundamental natures and behaviors, generate beings and minds.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Perhaps as a side effect, possibly as an epiphenomena of the transcendental, whatever it is they are up to,
Yeah.
right? And this makes me go insane with joy and ecstasy and wonder and awe, right? That like the human idea of gods, I don't know what kind of nonsense got into our mind about this stuff, because there's actual things like the sky and the stars and the moon and the sun and the earth that are so profoundly beyond everything that we are given as modern humans under the rubric knowledge, that why would we... I feel like we've been eating the wrapper of a candy bar, the candy bar of ourselves and our natures, over and over again, and the wrapper keeps getting more distasteful, and the more distasteful it gets, the more we keep eating the wrapper, right? And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that for myself. My ancestors did not live and die for that. My children must have something better than... They must have actual food, right? We must give them food. And that food, the universe is made of that food. We are made of that food. That food is for the liberation of beings. What do you think?
Makes sense to me.
Are we in agreement about this?
Yeah, I think so.
Beautiful. I mean, you seem to be very concerned with composing the nectar of liberation in the understanding of the meaning of the features of existence we can speak of. And that's something I profoundly honor and find intoxicating and liberating, altruistic, heroic, and beautiful. I have the same feeling about you.
Well, I'm certainly not using words to do that.
Yes, but you're very adept as an intellect. But in my experience of you, which is still relatively brief, you're using intimacy and relation to do that.
Yeah, which is why I find meditation so intriguing. And when you guys start talking about light, it feels like you're driving a car and I'm just like a rock you tied to a chain and I'm being dragged on the road because I have no fucking idea
that
what
sounds
you're
rough.
It's not painful on a rock.
Okay. But I mean, that doesn't sound like enriching.
Oh, no. It's a good time. I've been laughing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I'm trying to figure out. It's like, I've gotten so far reading and digesting what I've been reading to the best of my ability, and then not just keeping it in a bank, but like, oh, this is valuable, how do I apply this to my life? And I watch as my perspective changes and thus do the patterns in my life, and things go forward and they build on top of each other. And I read multiple books at the same time and they talk to each other.
Read multiple books at the same time.
It's awesome.
By the way, I wrote about this. Yeah, I wrote, when Tony was with me, he was like, you should be reading 7 books at the same time, all the time. Not only that, not only should you be reading 7 books at the same time,
right.
You should pretend that they all have one author.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just playing it being different.
That's
authors.
exactly what I do.
Yes. I call it book rings.
I don't even, that's why I unfortunately don't remember the authors most of the times. And I sometimes don't even remember the book titles.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, and so I don't know, this meditation process has been amazing because I feel like I am understanding things, but I can't bring them to words. And there's certain things that you guys say that I can immediately bring that back to my experience in meditation, but I don't know, then you lose me and you come back and there's coherence and discoherence and coherence and discoherence. And so I'm very curious about learning this sort of stuff, not through intellect, but through experience.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not opposed to the intellectual part, but I don't know. I feel like I have to read what you've read to understand a lot of what you say, and also have someone there go through it like you, you know?
Okay, so a lot of what Tyler and I are doing is philosophical in the sense of the reformulation of language, meaning, and categories, particularly. Does that make sense?
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, the reformulation of language, meaning, and categories.
Reformulation.
Like taking what we were told about light and reevaluating it.
I catch that
from another perspective.
Yeah, it's not time in space. It's you reverse it and then you ask a bunch of things about what is now different. Because
but we've been struggling to chase these questions of like, what is light?
Mm-hmm.
I think you have. What is time? What are beings?
Mm-hmm.
Why are there beings? All of these things.
And so my question is why. I understand why experimentation is incredibly invaluable in science. At least I don't know. Doing experiments, I learn things. That I can say that much, and I can benefit from that. But what I'm trying to figure out is why my experience of time, especially when I'm very present in meditation, and there's almost this timelessness. We're taking it and we're using language to try to then figure it out. That, to me, I have such a hard time figuring out how I'm taking such a deep, non-verbal experience and then trying to make it a verbal experience and transmit it to someone else. It just doesn't compute to me.
Mm-hmm. Tyler and I don't mean to speak for you, but we're being partly intellectual, partly linguistic. But we're playing with those elements. We are playing with those elements from a position above them, right? I think. Would you agree? For the sake of trying to reformulate in consciousness the path to thinking and speaking about these matters, that's not like meditation. Everyone understands there's a difference between discursive thought and being in presence.
Right.
I think you understand that difference, do you not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so this is a beautiful discussion because we have each of us our own experience and way of holding in awareness. The possibilities of presence in being, the possibilities of inquiry in intellect, the possibilities of articulation in language. And so that's part of what it's transforming, right? When it goes to you, it transforms to being in presence a lot because you've just had this meditation experience. And I share in some of that. I have a long history of meditation experience. I'm not claiming to be advanced, like accomplished.
Me neither. No.
I just understand what it means to sit, feel the body, follow the breath, right? Or work with a koan, right? Have a focus. So, in a way, conversation is it circles and transforms. And it goes underneath itself and it rises above itself and it comes back into presence and being and then it goes around this way, right?
Yeah.
And it's doing this dance. We're doing this dance together for each other.
Yeah.
And for the sake of something beautiful, right? We're not here trying to be performers on stage, I don't think. I lost myself in the conversation to the degree that I managed to almost feel that I was being authentic.
And so you think that authenticity is that sort of loss of self?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do too.
Yeah, I do. When I'm gone, all the most beautiful things happen.
Seriously?
Darren, like, cause like then we're not trying to be Darrenizing or anything like that. Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I said there are situations where you can be taken over by a voice in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have this idea of hearing voices, which is kind of trippy, and we're worried that might be crazy and stuff. But there's a weirder thing when voices speak through us, or the possibility of vocalization, like the spirit of vocalizing comes, and just I disappear and that thing takes me over. And there's this idea in religion, in Christianity, of speaking in tongues, but if like I'm trying to think of the inversion of that, of like, I'm not going to just invert the words because that would be stupid, but of becoming the voices. Becoming the voices. Or the voices be like having us on. Right? And that's really beautiful and amazing to me. And this conversation is one of the best I've ever had in my life. Like, this is fucking pinnacle stuff for me.
Likewise. Yeah, I mean, my motivation is in uncovering the history of certain concepts. So, when I was younger, I used to wonder why the world that we inhabit came to exist.
Right.
So that was my concern. And so I was motivated to uncover some of the roots of our scientific concepts in order to understand if they were grounded or had any kind of justification, right?
And one of my motivations was, why are people mean?
That's part of that. That's where I started.
That's a fundamental motivating thing for me. Like, why would you ever be mean? And probably some of the first problems I encountered were with my parents, who were very kind, mostly, and generous, and fairly intelligent, thankfully, but were occasionally mean, and I couldn't understand why they would ever be that way. Like, why would someone hit another person, ever?
Right.
Like, under any circumstances, why would you strike someone? I just couldn't. And then when I learned about things like war, or, the humans are doing research on animals. They're cutting up living beings while they're alive and screaming, and the humans are like, yes, by this we will learn to understand this, blah, 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 blah. Like, what the fuck is that thing saying things, torturing the animal? And yes, I get the hypocrisy of I eat meat and blah, blah. I understand, I really do. But yeah, what's the origin of injustice? How did things get messed up is really one of my motivations.
That's my motivation as well.
So we do have shared motivations that are deep.
I hated history class, so I never went there.
The idea that I should have to learn history was an offense to the soul of my being.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And it was kind of similar with math. I'm like, what is this for? Like, oh, another day where I haven't used algebra. Now I understand why math is profound. Unfortunately, far too late. They couldn't make it interesting to me as a child. I think I could make it interesting to children, but they failed abjectly to do that for me. What was your favorite subject?
Band. Yeah, by far.
Wow, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked chorus pretty good. Although I wasn't into sports, but running was amazing. How about you? Favorite subject?
I hated school.
I mean, you were subjected to school the same way we were. Was there nothing you liked about it?
Mythology.
What? Mythology class?
Wow! That opportunity, which is cool. In high school.
In high school?
Wow.
Mythology. Whoa. This guy's a symbolizer.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's really trippy. But
he was my favorite teacher. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. But give us something from childhood that you liked in school that at least wasn't the worst one.
In school.
I mean, weren't you into spelling?
No. Spelling?
Oh, spelling, dude. Oh, man, spelling. I was so good at that shit. The girls were like, wow, I can spell the ultramicroscopic silicovolcanic coniosis. Holy shit.
Right. No, I mean, like, I think the purpose of schooling is really to squash curiosity. So
We agree. It's an
it was
amputation.
totally just kind of.
But there wasn't like art, something, anything, nothing.
I mean, the whole institution was basically just a makeshift prison. So.
I would say it's right there. You literally had to be there.
That's so beautifully true. No, it's like a circus of amputation of the unique endowments of each child, right? And not only is it not going to synergize those endowments and lift them, it's gonna just fucking chop them off and tape the like ripped off pieces to the chalkboard and point at them and laugh. Right? Yeah. Oh yeah, that shit is rough, dude.
Yeah. Comes up in meditation quite a bit.
So, how do you guys feel about wrapping up for the moment?
I'm done.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think the ancients and the other intelligences did come and join us here, and I honor them and you, our ancestors, our world, the sky. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're amazing. Yeah. Much love.
Much love.
Now I will push the button that ends the